Ready?
Yeah. Yeah.
You guys, I am so excited to be joined right now by the Jan, aka Jan, aka everything cool related to the name Jan.
Sweet.
Is right over here. How are we doing today?
We're doing so good.
So I want to talk a little bit about the EP that you put out, How Do You Do?
Yes.
Tell me the how of How Do You Do came to be.
That's such a thoughtful question.
Right?
So How Do You Do is a song that I wrote a few years ago. My friend James, who basically produced it and put it out through his like independent record label, I should say. I'm thinking about how you said the how and how do you do, and I'm still focused on how thoughtfully that was phrased.
These things pop out of my head sometimes.
I love that.
I can't control it. Like, that's how I had to ask you that question.
But yes, How Do You Do is basically an introduction to me releasing actual music that people can stream and find. But it's all stuff that I had written during a very sad time in my life, and James was such a beautiful vessel in being like, you should come to Jersey and record songs and then I'll release it through my label.
Jersey.
Yeah.
Wow. Actually, this James sounds like there's more characters involved.
Yes.
How did you record this? Like the details, even booking a studio.
Oh,
what was the start to finish of this EP?
James Pasqua, incredible musician, producer, multi-instrumentalist. He has a label. When we did How Do You Do, it was the first EP that he wanted to produce. Right now, it's more focused and centered on like reggae music and dub music. But he kind of like took like an experimental chance on me and was like, I like love what you do. I love what you make. Let's make some music happen. So it was during the pandemic, and I flew out to Jersey for a weekend, and we just recorded that EP, and we had that come out. But it's funny because now he lives in Vegas. So
he's here in
yeah,
Vegas.
he moved here with his
Okay.
wife, Jackie. And
Do you think that you ended up in telling him that you came here? Do you think that that was some kind of inspiration?
I don't want to take all of the credit, but yes.
Because I find, like, as also a transplant from LA to Vegas, that when you start talking to people not here, but in the industry, they get a little curious. Like, what goes on there in Vegas? Like, what else? What else maybe am I missing? I also spotted the album artwork, which I thought was very tastefully, beautifully done.
Thank
you.
What
initially inspired the artwork?
After I had that whole session in Jersey, we were like, okay, what comes next? And it was like, oh, we need something to put on, like to have art for this and to be able to share this. My dear friend, she's a beautiful photographer. Her name is Daniela Blagoeva. We actually are both kickboxing trainers at the same gym that I was telling you about.
Nice.
And she is also an incredible artist. And she is kind of like my go-to. We are both each other's muses in that sense. So it's like, do you want to like get together and do a photo shoot and get some photos for this? And she's been very instrumental in that.
Did you feel that you needed to have some sort of a larger concept for, obviously this is kind of like a nice stripped back sound that you have.
Oh yeah.
Did you like that it felt a little bit more simple in this case and you just focused on the image of you?
Yes. It was, so the title, How Do You Do, to me, my best friend Sam was basically like, this is also like an introduction to your potential as an artist and the stuff that you put out. And it's kind of like saying, like, because it was my first EP, it's like, how do you do? I'm Jan.
Oh.
And it was actually brilliant marketing on her behalf. So
the genius of the marketing.
Yeah.
Cold Summer Records
Yes.
was another name that I spotted on there. For a lot of the Heads on TV followers, there's questions about record labels, but also just distribution in general, getting help from that. So can you tell me a little bit about these
Cold
guys?
Summer Records.
Yeah.
So Cold Summer Records is largely owned by James Pasqua, who I flew out to Jersey for, and we did that whole beautiful recording weekend. It was just as experimental for the both of us in that respect, I feel. This was his like first time doing all of this. Even like saying this now, I don't necessarily know the intricacies of how he operates his label.
Okay.
But it's purely independent. I really admire how he was kind of just like taking a chance on me and was like, I want to do something with this, because now it's like strictly reggae and like music that I'm truly not familiar with. To answer and go back to that question, I don't know too much about Cold Summer Records other than that they're fucking amazing and that they let me get this far.
They're amazing.
And it's funny how I'm saying they because it's one person. So
it's one person.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask too, the process. I think there's this mystique around what it means to be signed or even work with a label. Apart from knowing James, did he want to do any additional like auditioning with you, or was it just he had been recording your tracks?
Yeah.
And that was the foot in the door?
The latter. That
Okay.
is the foot. The latter is the foot.
No tricks other than just get your networking on. People.
Honestly.
We talk about networking a lot
Yeah.
on Heads on TV. So.
Yeah, that's good. It's very instrumental into wherever you think you need to get.
It's a big piece of it. I was going to bring up the reggae and the dub sound because I was on Spotify and it actually, I think it popped up a version of the song that was acoustic, and then it gave me like a reggae and a dub version.
Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, you're taking me back to like the entire timeline of everything. So I had one song out on Spotify. And James was like, is it cool if I take this song and I take like a reggae spin on it? And then he took that song, recorded it, and made it entirely a reggae track. And then that to me was like, wow, this is why music is so fucking amazing, because it's so malleable and it could just blend to whoever the creator is, to how they want it. And I thought that was really cool.
Ooh.
So that was my foot in the reggae door. James is also an incredible guitarist for a local band called Stepadelic.
Okay.
And they're like this dope reggae band who perform all throughout the city. They were actually at Brooklyn Bowl last year. So yeah, we were talking about that earlier.
Gotta check them out.
Yeah.
Did you find in that process of having a remix done, were you involved beyond just presenting the original track, or were you in production with that?
I was involved in that he would send me versions and tracks, and I'd be like, well, I don't typically love how that sounds. But even that alone, it was more so like, wow, I can't believe somebody would hear this and have their own version on it. And I think that's really incredible. Show me how you see me and what you want to do from that. And again, that was just really fucking refreshing to hear that from a genre that I typically do not listen to, but is also really like, do you like reggae? I think it's so cool that, to me, I respect his artistry and his musicianship so much that it was an honor that he was like, I want to take this and like, again, make it from my version. And I think that's really cool that music is flexible like that.
Especially as an independent artist, budgeting comes up constantly. And you think about these opportunities. Sometimes it might be something that's free, like someone just wants to basically remix your stuff.
Yeah.
But do you have a philosophy about whether you think it's quote unquote worth it to be putting a song out and then trying to seek out a producer or someone to actually remix it?
Do I think it's worth it?
Do you think it's worth it in the sense of, did it, I guess, push you further in any particular direction? As an artist?
Absolutely. And that also kind of goes hand in hand with what we were talking about with networking. To me, it's like the more the merrier. The more ears that hear it, the more hands that want to get on it. Like, that is an honor. And that is, I welcome that. Like, other artists might think differently, but I'm just like, yeah, fuck yeah. Get on it.
Get on it.
Get on it.
How throughout the years has your songwriting process evolved? And also just tell me a little bit about your process so far as a songwriter.
So my struggle with songwriting is that I had momentum issues.
Okay.
I would like sit down, write my things, and then I'm incredibly like self-critical, such as every artist. It's like, well, fuck this. I'm done with this. This isn't going anywhere. Do you ever like have that as a songwriter?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How many times this week, you mean? Did that
How many times this morning?
Did that actually happen?
So in knowing others who share the same like musical perceptions and whatnot, it was very cool to have James be like, I want to do this, because that in turn inspires me to want to keep going and want to achieve that momentum and want to keep on writing. It's such a muscle, songwriting. And
huge muscle. There
are many times where those muscles for me are like almost so close to being atrophied, which is so depressing when I say that out loud. But yeah.
Telling Jan before we got started that I, as an artist, am in the process of getting back into songwriting and maybe performing again. And after taking a little bit of a break, and I cannot tell you how the songwriting is a muscle phrase just keeps popping into my head, because I think I couldn't get myself started at first. And then I said, well, why don't you the idea of sitting and trying to perfect it for 3 hours or perfect a song is too much. How about just 30 minutes like you're at the gym or something? And I started there, and it's been cathartic. It's been working. It's got me writing again. And I just wanted to ask, like, in your songwriting process, do you have any of those sort of things that you set up for yourself that keeps you writing and keeps you evolving?
What you were saying about routine, like, that is so crucial. Like, to wake up and to actually mindfully, intentionally set aside time. I don't know how you do it, but I like love to write. It's a little old fashioned. And like people were like, you still write in cursive?
Oh, no way.
Do you write in cursive?
Oh, I love cursive. The thing is though, I get very like impatient with myself. So if I'm trying to like chicken scratch lyrics, I might just like be really quick with it. But That sounds to me too like you're taking your time.
Yes.
That's a very mindful process for you.
I like how you're saying that, because when I think of writing in cursive, I think that, holy shit, I'm so fucking lazy. I can't even lift my pen up when I'm writing.
Cursive is the beautiful dying art, though, as we know.
It really is. I was just talking to my friend about this the other day. It's very much dying, and we need to resuscitate that. But back to that, being mindful and intentional about setting aside that time to reflect what is going on in your mind, where you're at the time. It really is a muscle. Equating it with like showing up to the gym or showing up to work out. Showing up is half the battle. You're basically just like showing up for yourself to know that you want to make music or like to write or express yourself.
And I always like to ask, because it's sometimes controversial, do you do like vocal warm-ups even for songwriting sessions? Like the ones that you might do for a show?
Oh, no.
Or do you just kind of like, you're just sitting there?
I just raw dog it.
She's raw dogging these lyrics.
I'm raw dogging these
lyrics. These cursive lyrics too. We would think you'd have like a full operatic like way to prepare to sing your cursive lyrics.
Like vocal fry that shit up. It's fine.
I love that though. I really do want to talk to you a little bit about Las Vegas.
Yeah.
For fans of the podcast, you guys know I've filmed a lot of these seasons in LA so far, but it was always my intention to go to new cities and figure out what the music scene is in that city by talking to people actually participating in it. So I first just want to ask how you landed here in Vegas.
Oh, my family moved here in like 93. I was born in LA. My family's from LA. My parents are nurses, were nurses. And it was just cheaper out here to migrate over to Vegas and to see like the dirt that is now, as you've looked around, is just thriving right now, and it's never ending. Yeah, I've Vegas through and through. Like I know that I was born in LA, but I'll always be like, no, I'm like Vegas. I went to school here. I graduated here. I'm a Vegas person.
Did you find, because I was originally going to ask you about before you came here, what was the experience? It sounds like most of your sort of like even adolescent music industry experience was here.
Yes.
What was that scene like?
Oh, okay. So I went to an arts high school here. It's called Las Vegas Academy of the Performing Arts. And you had to like audition to get in. And I was like a theater kid, always in music, doing musicals and whatnot. And it was kind of like being surrounded with like-minded kids who also really wanted to be there because they worked their asses off to get into that school and to stay there. It was very
competitive.
Yeah.
Right? I've heard of it. I have heard of it.
Mm-hmm. But looking back at that and knowing, so I also lived in Canada. Side note for that.
Cool.
With a former lover. But now I'm back
up to Canada. Always ends up that way, doesn't it?
Going away to Canada.
Up
it's
to
so
Canada.
cliche.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
But
quick detour.
Yeah.
Quick detour.
Little detour. But coming back here is like, I still see like people I went to school with, and they're still working on like their craft and stuff. And I think that's really great.
Being in that actual academy environment, I always consider that like pre-college college.
Yes,
like
it's exactly what it was.
So you might have been, even some of those years, 13, 14, 15 still felt like in a competitive college environment. What were you guys doing as super talented musicians to go have fun, in the sense of like I'm sure parties and all that, but I mean play music for the fun of it or go participate in the scene?
That's a fantastic question. Mindful Marilyn.
Oh, wow. New name. Thanks, Jan.
Actually, as you're saying that, the first thing that came to my mind was we were weird ass theater kids. And we spent so much time on campus because we were treated like adults who had to like work during the productions and I remember having school nights and like not going home and not reaching home until like midnight or something. And that's abnormal. And then having to wake up at 5 a.m. the following morning so I can catch like algebra for first period. That's so weird. But our favorite pastimes when we did have them were like going to a friend's house and ear candling. Have you ever ear candled?
I've heard of, I think I have one somewhere in here. I've heard of it, but so this is more so you guys wanted a break.
Yeah.
It wasn't, because there's a lot of this, like, if you grew up in the middle of nowhere, it was more, I've used those weekends to make sure I was at shows. It sounds like you guys were like,
no, we just wanted a break.
That was our week.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then I have to ask, that kind of pressure, what made you then want to go even into the more pressure canned actual music industry? What was pulling you in?
Well, after I graduated high school, I really wanted to appease my strict Asian Filipino parents. And I started with a nursing program over at UNLV. And I was like, this is not for me. What I really want to do is write. And I did journalism and media studies. So that was what I put my focus on. And then I did that whole thing. I graduated. I have my degree in journalism. It wasn't until I started taking internships from advertising firms here in Vegas where I noticed that that is not where I wanted to be. And I would leave during my break to write music and like to learn the ukulele or like to focus on like my more creative endeavors. And I think this is such a therapy session.
Wow. She's figured out what I do these interviews for.
I was a really good student. I thrived. Like a 9 to 5 was really cool, and I respect that, and that's fucking amazing that you could like show up to the office and do these things. But there was a part of me that was like screaming, like, what are you doing? Are you making the right decisions? Are you trying to appease like society or your parents? Or like, what is it that you actually really want to do? I remember there was a time in the office where like I was playing my playlist or something and I was singing along to it. And like another coworker said something about like, oh, how you should sing, or like, you should like take that up. And then like they didn't even know like the internal battle I was going through about like, oh my God, I don't know if I should be a singer. I need to like pursue something professionally that aligns with my degree. But at this point in my 30s, I'm just thinking like songwriting and writing itself are best friends. And
yes.
there was a time in one of my journalism courses where it was news reporting, and I would write articles and I wrote for the paper and everything. And a lot of the time I would hear your news writing voice is very colorful. And thinking about that now, I'm like, that is something that I could have applied to my own songwriting, which I still do.
Wow.
So.
Your news writing voice is very colorful. It's interesting too, because I have known a lot of creative types who almost in a volatile way will go the complete opposite direction. So they'll almost be angry with their ambition of wanting to be in art or be an artist. And they'll say, I need to do something more clinical, be a lawyer or a doctor. So it's just really cool to hear you open up about how that you kind of did. You said, you know what, I'm going to try just journalism. And then they said, you don't sound like you should be.
Yeah, basically.
Your voice is different than that.
Yeah. Or like whenever I would do like broadcasting and I would like do these announcements, I remember this specific moment where one of my classmates in the bathroom like approached me and she was like, you have an amazing like speaking voice. And then she found out that I could sing. And like, it's almost like you should pay attention to the things that you hear that are actually quite small, but actually mean like all the difference.
Absolutely. That's life, man. Tell me then, okay, so we're in our car, we're writing music, we're just escaping the world of journalism. At some point, I assume you move on.
Yeah.
So where does it take you then when you have this realization?
Well, when I lived in Canada, I had to wait a really long time to get my permanent residence and to work legally. So I was working under the table for a lot of gigs. And then that's when I wanted to take my music to the streets, and I learned and loved the art of busking. So I was out and about in Calgary, Alberta, performing for strangers. and that like set something to me. I was like, this is really great and this is really fun and I want to do more of this.
Did the busking make its way down the coast? As in, did you start eventually busking back here in Vegas or LA, or was it just a one-time thing?
It was a sprinkle of things. And then it was the pandemic and my mother dying to take a dark turn on this that took me back to Vegas. And then during the processing of grief and whatnot is when I got a little more in touch with my artistry.
Wow. And
my music making.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that's not easy. So then when you get yourself back here in Vegas, and I realize now that I'm assuming some of the people you still know today, you knew back in school days, but I'm sure you've also met a whole new crowd.
Yes.
What has been some of the challenging pieces, though, of being here in Vegas? Now you know you want to make music, you're putting music out. What are some of the things you're finding yourself overcoming?
Ooh. Do you mean as far as like booking gigs or showing up to events?
I think I more so mean, for a lot of artists who want to make it, they immediately book a flight to Nashville, New York, or LA. You say, you know what, I have music and I want to share it, but I'm here in Vegas. Yeah. So there's going to be good to that. But also, what are some of the things that just might be easier if you were in LA or New York that you find?
I feel like the climate of music in Vegas is very centered around the Strip. and like huge acts, which is amazing and like a testament to how fucking awesome Vegas is. But as far as like the indie scope of like singer-songwriters in like downtown or the arts district, that is a challenge in itself, because I don't necessarily feel that there are enough connections here as much as there would be, comparatively speaking, to LA or Nashville or whatnot. Like so many people that I went to high school with who wanted to pursue and become like a pop star and whatnot, immediately it was like, I'm moving to LA, I'm moving to Nashville and all of that. So Vegas is kind of just, I feel like a hidden gem. I still feel.
And on the rise too.
On the rise.
As someone who also, I mean, I have lived in New York, I've lived in LA. I think for me, I've never seen like the cusp of something before in one of these cities. Like I think LA, it's so established. New York is so established. This seems like it could kind of go any way at this point.
Yeah.
A lot of big artists are interested in being here.
Yeah.
The other thing that really struck me when I first moved here was the arts district, and I know you've already brought up, but learning, my first visit to the Strip when I grew up in New England was like Excalibur, right? And I was like a little
Same
kid. And so I was like, this is amazing, and you can win money in here. And it's like, no, you're 8 years old. But that was my first introduction. So in the thought of moving here, I was like, well, I don't want to be on the Strip all the time. There's a whole other world here in Vegas. And I want to ask, how do you, because we're going to talk a little bit about the shows and things that you play here, but how are you also sort of like finding other friends and meeting like-minded people in different areas of the Strip? Like, how do you go about doing that?
It's literally going out and like going to events, going to the Shag Room, going to open mics. Open mic, like those two words together, I guess kind of has a denotation these days. Actually, I'll go back to a story about open mic at the Shag Room.
Yeah.
At the Virgin Hotel. I was with my brother and we were having lunch somewhere, and he pulled out the Las Vegas Weekly, and there was an ad that was like, the Shag Room at the Virgin Hotel, open mic, you can win la da 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 da. And my brother was like, you should join this. And I was like, okay, cool, maybe. And then I set time aside and I actually went to one. And that was kind of like the beginning of like, holy shit, there's some seriously incredible musicians at this cute little lounge in this casino that's like on the south side of the Strip or on Paradise or whatnot. And that to me was like, yeah, set foot out there, meet new people. Basically, I know it sounds so simple and it's easier said than done, but go out there, show up. And like, you never know who you're going to meet. You never know who you're going to become like lifelong friends with. You never know who you're going to want to support in the long run, and like discover that you actually have more in common with than you figured. Like how you were like, yeah, you were at Khruangbin.
Yeah, I think that's we were talking about how Khruangbin was in town at Brooklyn Bowl, and I was like, you know, I do go to shows by myself from time to time, but I just was like, I wish I had like a show buddy.
Yeah.
And the second Jane got, she's like, you hit me up. Like this is how it all happens here.
Yes.
I want to do a follow-up. I love your answer to that question for our introverts. But what about when you're there and you're shy, or you're there and you perform and you just you're maybe by yourself and you're just like, now what? What's the next step if I'm not immediately talking to people, but I want to make it known that this is a culture I want to be a part of, or I want to be in this scene? What might you say?
I consider myself like an extroverted introvert as well.
There is some clinical word for it.
There have been times where I did show up and I did share my work, and I didn't want to communicate with anybody because I was so intimidated. And I was like, well, shit, what's going to happen now? Man, you made me want to like journal about that.
Journal to an audience of possibly thousands.
All I would want to say for that is consistency. Even if you feel uncomfortable like communicating with anybody, the fact that you showed up and like sang your songs and didn't speak to anybody, know that you're still going to make space to keep doing that. And then by doing that, maybe people will approach you. Maybe you don't have to necessarily reach out as hard because you're already out there and you're in that space.
And I'll also say, like, on top of that, going up to someone who performed that you thought was awesome is another big one.
Yeah.
I have made friends that way many times. You just made their whole night possible.
Yeah.
So that's another one I would say on top of that.
And it's so validating. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't know which artist, like, where they're at in their journey.
Yep.
But like the slightest hint of support or like recognition goes the longest way is what I've learned.
I want to talk to you a little bit about booking shows here in Vegas.
Yes.
It's a big curiosity for those who maybe want to move here or book shows here. What has been your process? Obviously, you are essentially a native of Vegas, have performed here a lot. What's your story of how you got started in booking actual shows? Who did you talk to? How did you get connected?
So a lot of this also goes back to my experience with my residency at the Shag Room. With the open mic process, I was fortunate enough to win a season. And by winning that season, it just like opened so many doors for me. I met a lot of people who are so kind to like shout my name and be like, oh, you're looking so a lot of it is word of mouth and connections and people and networking. That's really what it has gone down to for myself. A lot of the gigs that I do book, I am asked to do them. They reach out to me and I like consider if it's something that I want to do. And usually typically it's like, yeah, fuck yeah, I'll do that. I want to seek out more. And I know that there's a way to do that. And that's, again, by going out there and like meeting.
But I love that vulnerable part of this where you, because Jan's being humble here. Jan has booked and played a lot of really cool shows here in town, constantly performing. And I love hearing that you're actually still trying to figure out the next step. So
yes.
This is like the shows that you could be going to, watching somebody crush it. They might be insecure about where their next step is. Yeah. And that's so important to talk about, you know?
There really is not a set formula, I feel. Again, with being out there and putting myself out there, it is such an opportunity to meet other people who are like, I would love to book you for this. I'd love to book you for that. Even if it's like a private party. That's just, again, how you meet more people. And that is my understanding of how I've been booking gigs. As far as agents and stuff goes, there definitely is a well of resources here that I've learned from my fellow musician friends who are always like, I told this person your name, especially like on the Strip and stuff where there's like bar gigs and whatnot. There's always somebody to speak to.
For some of those where you didn't have a connection, would you feel comfortable just going up and maybe asking a sound person or someone running the bar?
Yes. Literally ask anybody. Ask around. Put yourself out there. And again, I keep thinking about that note you said about what about like an introvert? And I'm like trying really hard to find some sort of way to put myself in that mold.
This is why I absolutely love conversations with artists.
Yeah.
The personality types are all over the place. And obviously the talent that comes out on a stage, it's either a super extroverted person walking up that stage or someone who doesn't want to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Still giving both amazing performances. So keep the introverted piece in mind, I guess, as we talk through some more of this, because I haven't been asking that enough. I've noticed there's been more of those questions of, gee, Marilyn, that's great. Like everyone says, you just go talk to people. I'm afraid to do that. I don't think about that sometimes. It's not just an easy thing to do.
I will say there's a lovely booking. Have you met Lily when we were over at Sundry?
Yes, I have. Yep.
Lily is such a lovely resource for booking as well, because she has her like booking entertainment and she knows like she's so well-rounded and knows all of the local artists, and she's also very talented and amazing at shouting other artists' names to get gigs.
There's still good people in this industry, we swear.
Absolutely.
Jan has met many of them.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. Now, if you're comfortable sharing, I wanted to ask, not really a range of what you get paid, but can you just give me an example of a couple recent gigs you've performed here in Vegas?
Yeah.
And what the setup was. So was it just you? Was there a band? And then a ballpark of what you were paid.
The gig over at Shag Room. I didn't have any like much prior experience to performing for 4 hours. It was a 4-hour set. And the deal was $400 weekly. And then tips on top of that. And then like discounts added to like bars and whatnot. But that is like the cut and dry version of that gig. And it wasn't, no additional money was added to it if you were having a band member or not. So again, it goes really hand in hand with like, do I really want to be here and do I really want to do this? And
I just want to ask, what you mean by that is it was a 400 clean, even if you were paying other musicians.
Correct.
That's important to know.
Yes.
Yeah, that's important to know. Okay.
Yeah. You can't really make, what is it that you were saying earlier? Like the music industry doesn't make that much.
Oh, just the music industry jobs don't pay that much. That was something I said and stand by.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, it's true.
But then sometimes you come along and you're like, wait, what? How much are you paying me? Like strip gigs? They're great.
Yeah, I have to ask because I know everyone will want to know. What is an average, like you're at the Venetian or something and there's a bar there.
Yeah.
What is someone in there paid?
Oh, you can make like $900 in tips on top of like a $500 night.
900 in tips.
Drunk people are very generous with
that sounds
their
like
money.
a major Vegas gig perk.
Yeah.
It's the drunk people who show up to your shows.
And that's even, I'm also speaking about another artist friend of mine who told me how much she made the other day. And I was like, that's fucking amazing. Good for you.
What are some of your favorite venues to perform at here in Vegas?
There's this place in the Arts District called Taverna Costera. I perform there every Sunday with my band. And like through there, I've been involved in like such a huge like familial community. The owner, Jeff Huang, he is very instrumental in getting local artists and bands together and performing at that venue.
That's cool.
Very cool. It started out doing with an open mic. Yeah, I started going to open mics there right when it opened, right before Shag Room. And it's the same group of artists who are there in that area, like the Arts District, Shag Room. Vegas is very small.
It's very small. Every time you reference the open mics opening doors for you, though, it takes me back to my years of doing that. And I can't stress enough how happy I am that they're back sort of in this semi-post-COVID world, I guess I should say. But how cool is that you're saying these are the things that actually open the doors to official gigs, not open mics, but like official gigs.
Yes, because they see you and they see what you can bring and they call you to these gigs. So at the Virgin again, God, I love that place. Leon Bridges is performing. During the open mic, my friend Jenny, she's the sound engineer for the Shag Room. Last minute, she sang a song. And then the guitarist for Leon Bridges showed up and was like, do you want to sing a song? And then she won that night.
Whoa.
Yeah, they did like I Will Survive. Like that's how amazing Vegas is. You never know. Artists are everywhere.
But interesting to hear that someone touring through knew of the Shag Room and even stopped in to see what was going on.
Yes.
That's crazy.
To know that there's an open mic on the Strip. It's like super inclusive and super welcoming, and everybody is there for the same thing because everybody's like-minded and they just want to share music and sing and perform. Back to the introvert thing, I don't think introverts would necessarily feel like they don't belong because they're in a room of people who are welcoming that and like want you there. And you're just in a room where you do feel like you belong because, again, it's inclusive.
I want to ask you too, I thought of this while you're talking about being on the Strip. I think for most of us who've just really visited the Strip and we don't see it enough, there's a lot of casual stuff going on there too. Like I think everyone's not showing up in like, go-go boots and like crazy Vegas feather hats. It's very similar to what you might see in a New York or an LA. Even bringing your own music, do you find that it's a welcome environment here in Vegas to be, I'm doing a show tonight of just my originals?
Yes.
Do you find that that's welcomed?
I do, especially now with the Arts District. And there's places like The Space and 18 Bin where they're doing all of these like original showcases. It's in the community of the artists who like already know each other and they're familiar with each other or they support each other and they want to bring each other up. It's nothing that's like I wouldn't expect another artist to be talking down on somebody else in this environment, which I don't know. Is that what it was like in LA? Do you feel?
This is how bad it's gotten, you guys.
Yeah.
Is anyone nice to anyone anymore in LA? Great question. Honestly, I also in LA was always seeking out the smaller venues and felt that communal piece where I didn't sort of feel out of place. But there's just something, and why I was so excited for this season and talking to all you guys here, there is a weird intimidation factor on the outside looking in of thinking Vegas is very polished. So that if you maybe moved here and like I was telling you, I had a couple acoustic songs, could I go perform them? You're saying that absolutely.
There is room for you.
Absolutely is.
There is space for you. And that's what I want to see more of in Vegas. And I think we are seeing that.
Speaking of welcoming wonderful people, tell me the wildest, craziest thing that has ever happened to you at a Vegas live show that you performed.
Ooh. It's not necessarily wild. And I actually thought it was really cute. But I had a set and somebody had tipped me in edibles.
Whoa, which I mean here that's just like eat it, like thanks.
Yeah, here you go, girl, have fun.
Wow, in the tip jar level, just like dropped them in.
And I actually at the time I was like, it was late at night and I was like, cool, this is great, this is better than cash right now. You make me want to seek out wild shit now.
Well, again, I'm just bringing up all the things that people imagine happen because they don't realize there's such a casual, chill culture of open mics and performances here in Vegas. We think it's all drunk, wild people throwing beer pong at you.
So my Sunday gig that I do with my band, it's like 4 hours and it's during brunch and it's at Taverna Costera. That has like the most wacky but wholesome vibe. It's like a familial community. People are there for brunch and they're enjoying, and it's not rowdy. I mean, it can get rowdy, but it's nothing like wild, crazy shit, I feel. It's pretty tame.
Pretty tame out here in Vegas.
At brunch
vibes.
At brunch.
At brunch vibes. Speaking of brunch gigs too, and just like a variety of the gigs you perform, again, if you're comfortable, just for the educational purposes of knowing, how are you sort of splitting income right now as doing this full time? I want to ask if you are doing this full time. What are these different streams of income for you as an independent artist?
From music alone.
From music alone. But if you're anything else too that factors into your life.
Other Vegas-y things. So like promo modeling at conferences and conventions.
What is that?
Yeah. Vegas has a lot of conferences. CES. Have you heard of CES?
Oh, yeah.
CES happens all the time. I'm with a lot of agencies that do like a lot of brand ambassadorships, or like promo modeling and staffing. And that is also like a really neat income to supplement music as well.
And then you're balancing. So do you schedule these gigs throughout the week and you just kind of balance things around it?
Exactly.
Do you have to have, because you talked about bringing other musicians with you, do you have to stay really organized and like keep them up to date on when things are happening? How do you do that?
Constant communication, always. A hilarious group chat. And most of the time I like to split things evenly.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel like that's fair. I feel like, again, we are showing up and we're exerting the same effort. When I do like my solo stuff, that's also like, it's just for me. So I do a lot of duo stuff with my brother. That's also split evenly. When I did the Shag Room, I learned that it is important to split things evenly, but I did not. And I was like, I booked this. I won the contest. I sang my original music. So I deserve the most. And then growing from that, I have learned that that's not necessarily how I want to do it moving forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
We learned from that.
Yeah.
But that was your prize money.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
I earned it.
I was like, I worked hard for this.
I earned it. The last part of our conversation, and what I always like to chat with artists about, is social media, the digital worlds. We talked a lot about Vegas, but it's getting people to these shows using social media. What is your sort of current content schedule?
I do not have a schedule, and that is what I want to navigate to. And I think you and I need to talk about this offline, but
I know someone who can help you with that. If you had to just like give your philosophy on it, I guess. So like how are you building something that you want to post about and then making sure it gets posted?
I don't really know if there's a method to that madness. Again, I think it is just fucking doing it and sharing that and posting it. Like, for example, for the gig in the show that I have tomorrow, I was like, I want to post something really funny and silly, and it's wholesome, and it's at a library, and it's a music and arts festival that's probably going to have a bunch of like families and kids. So I did Golden Girls.
That's kind of so fun though, to suddenly have like a kid audience.
Yes.
Because you can pull out all the stops, all the animation, all of like the interesting songs and just ones you wouldn't do. Typically when you're performing, is it word of mouth to get people there? Because I know you probably have followers not in Vegas.
Yes.
But are you trying to more word of mouth?
Word of mouth.
Okay.
That's exactly what that is. And I'm glad that you're able to bring that out.
Well, you might be surprised with my follow-up here, because I know you were just saying that you're still trying to figure out your social media game, but I was really impressed when I did my homework. And again, I always do my homework on my guests. I like to look at what they're posting recently to chat about it. Your photo shoot game is phenomenal.
That's high praise.
I'm looking at half of it like, oh, I want to do a shoot there. Like, you have just covered your bases. Cactus Joe's is one of my favorite spots. But everyone,
you love Cactus Joe's too?
I love Cactus Joe's.
It's amazing.
That is a must drive off the strip for if you ever come here. But I bring this up as there's a lot of just different like buzzy, like the Boneyard, Neon Boneyard. There's buzzy spots to go do photo shoots, and you've kind of covered them all. Yeah. How are you connecting with photographers to go do that?
Oh, so my best friend Daniela Blagoeva, the photographer who did the artwork for How Do You Do. We have a lot of things where I'm like, I shoot her a concept and I'm like, I want to do a shoot for this, and she's always down for it and just so down to do experiment. I wanted to do a content shoot for a show that I'm doing in June, and we just went to Cactus Joe's. I officiated a wedding there last year, and then I also sang for their first dance. So going back there was also kind of sentimental. And then going there without the bride and groom and then meeting the people who work there was really dope, because they're chill as hell and they want you to go there.
It's a cool spot over there.
It's so dope there. I love it. I want to go back.
Cactus Joe's, is kind of like Joshua Tree in a store.
I love
Is that it's like Joshua Tree?
I love Joshua Tree so much. I love it so much I wrote a song about it.
Ooh, have you ever gone there for anything gig or music, like Pioneer Town, like that whole?
I fucking love Pioneer. I was at Pappy and Harriet's like 3 weeks ago
Pappy
for a Dodge.
awesome.
A Dodge. Do you know Lucius?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, Dawes and Lucius did like a hybrid set. It was very cool.
Those are pop up too.
Yeah. What?
Those are like very, like if you can get in, like that stuff just happens so fast.
It does.
I saw Jade Bird as an artist who I love. I got to interview her there. But that's another thing about living in Vegas is you are a quick shot to LA, Joshua Tree, sort of kind of Phoenix. I don't know if there's much. You could.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'm like, I've never been.
Tahoe, and everyone knows.
Tahoe's dope.
The answer you gave about social media where you said you're hoping to improve it. I would love a little vulnerable moment follow up here. What do you think you are trying to improve with it? Is it the content calendar? Is it what you're posting? What's missing?
Like literally all of the above. I feel like I can use a lot of help in so many facets of that. But what I really want to do is get into more like videos and real. And I saw the stuff that you post on like Heads On. I think that's so beautiful and wonderful and a way to get the new traction. I think when we had met, you were talking about how like TikTok is like kind of phasing out a little bit.
By the way, we're filming this days after the ban is like written in. I'm going to tell you this though. I have learned how to share my knowledge and sort of make these videos, but I think every artist should be doing what I'm doing. As in, I think it's so these conversations I capture because every artist I talk to has incredible insight and is kind of not sure where to put it. And would you agree that like you watch sort of me, I sit there, I'm just talking through my philosophies of whatever. You could do something like it too. Do you think an artist could benefit from just like sharing their own philosophy?
And again, it kind of goes where I'm at like internally with like, why am I not making time and being mindful of making this content? So that's like a struggle that I'm dealing with on my own. But yeah, that's what you're doing is fucking cool.
Well, what you're doing is infinitely cool as an artist. I always tell artists like it's learning to ask those friends to help film some stuff at a show. And it doesn't always have to be footage of you on stage. It's just silly things that happen throughout the day and start to make content a more organic piece of what you already do, because I think artists do not let like everything that you think is boring and inane and just part of your day to day is all the stuff we want to see about how you do these shows, like your day to day. All the gig questions I have for you about Vegas, it's because before I came here I knew none of this, and I think you are like, yeah, I do that every Sunday. Yeah, and so that piece of it, or even just talking about how you're
giving me so many ideas.
Making the music, and like, you guys are just sitting in on a session now. But it's really cool to see an artist like yourself doing really great things independently pushing yourself, but still saying, I'm figuring this out.
There's so many corners in my life right now where I'm like, no, I could use some help. And again, it really is an internal like mental struggle that I'm like trying to overcome.
Working on it every day.
Every day.
My last question for you. This comes because when we went out to have drinks that time, we were talking about, I think it was you that talked about acting.
Yes.
And I was like, you know what? If I have Jan on this couch, I got to ask you, tell me about your history with acting. Is it still part of your entertainment expression, I guess?
I feel my experience with being a theater kid, I always wanted to move to LA. Go back to LA, do the whole thing, go on auditions, get an agent and whatnot, like what you were expressing at the Sundry. I still feel like I haven't done that yet. And there's something in like my soul that's like, girl, you need to go try that before you die. And acting is definitely something implemented in performing because you're always putting on a face or like a mask that you want to like share as you're promoting your own shit. So does that answer your question?
It does. What would you think if you had to answer this right now, which you do? Where would you start with acting? If you were like, you know what, I'm not maybe trying to move to Hollywood, but I want to do acting, but I live in Vegas. What might you try to do?
Ooh, commercial acting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good paychecks there too.
What an insight. A lot, again, what I was talking about with like the staffing and the promo modeling that I do with like conferences and stuff, you meet a lot of other people who are also in acting and like have a bunch of other trades. I want to get into that. Again, it's just like, do it.
Just do
like
it, people.
Standstill. Yeah, I have a tendency to like get stuck in my head and reach a point of stagnancy. again and again, that's just like overcoming it. So
Jan, this was amazing. I want to know where you are sort of headed next. I know you have a lot of gigs that may change by the time this comes out, but where can people find you and keep up with your Vegas life?
Oh, find me on social media, on Instagram at JanJanGrams. Find me every Sunday at Taverna Costera from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. It's my band and I, Jan Jan and the Gentlemen. And find me hanging out with Marilyn Moser at Brooklyn Bowl shows.
Oh, stop it. Yeah, we're going to have to hit some of those up. This was so amazing, Jan. Thank you for coming on the Buy My Merch podcast.
It's an honor, truly.